The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
BUMBLEFOOT. BUMBLEFOOT.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we're in the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you. With you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat of our roll. We will be able to prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and liftoff.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride on this Thursday, October 19th, Friday, October 20th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North, on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, as we are here for your listening needs 7 days a week. We welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key, in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music? Get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy and Sons of Apollo. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Hey, we're all over social media, so give us a follow. We're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows from iTunes. Our website, again, is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on Revolution Radio. You can find us on Spreaker, the UPRN chat room, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or, if you're on Twitter, just use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will get to your questions and comments in there as well live. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. You could shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. You'd look good in one of our SOR t-shirts. We have the Encounter online dealing with everything paranormal. Read my latest blog as well. And if you've had an experience or a situation you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. We also got great video footage from UFO seekers and Contact TV. Just a couple of weeks ago, Sin City, Las Vegas, was enjoying just another great night of partying, music, and gambling on their famous strip when all hell broke loose. At the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival on October 1st, those music goers dressed in cowboy boots, short shorts for the women, and Stetsons couldn't fathom what was about to happen a few short minutes into the closing act's music set. As Jason Aldean was on stage, rapid gunfire erupted. In the end, 58 innocent people were dead, over 500 wounded. Now, as producer and host of this show, I've thought long and hard about actually doing a show on this topic. I was on with Elizabeth Anglin the night the shooting broke out. I wasn't sure if this was a topic that we should touch since, well, we really don't deal with topics like this here very often, if at all. But since Las Vegas, to me, is like a home away from home, where I have family and I have many friends, I made the decision. Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News is from Las Vegas, but now residing in Texas. He had many friends at this concert. The story hit home for him as well as some of the questions, like how could a semi-retired 64-year-old millionaire like Stephen Paddock just snap? And did he act alone? Tonight we will get into it with Jamie and the eyewitnesses he talked to and the information he's gathered with what they have to say about that horrendous night just 18 days ago. Jamie Sexton, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. How you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. How you doing?
Good. And I know that night when this was going on, you and I were actually messaging each other, making sure that, you know, your friends were okay and you were in touch and you were a little stressed out. When you look at that whole shooting that happened in Las Vegas, was the Strip due for it? Or do you think that this was just a random act? Because Las Vegas, everybody knows it. Next to New York, next to Los Angeles, I think Vegas is, you know, the biggest city that people want to go to for partying, for adventure, and whatever it takes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Vegas has probably been, contemplated a lot of times as a possible place for something to happen. I'm sure that it's been a big consideration for law enforcement and federal officials as a possible target. I've never really heard any credible threats towards Vegas that I can recall, but I'm sure that, Vegas would definitely be one of the top 10, hypothetical targets for something to go down for a number of motivations.
How did this hit home for you? Because you left Las Vegas for San Antonio, Texas, not that long ago, just a few short months ago, in order to concentrate more on business than the lifestyle that Vegas has to offer. But nonetheless, you've called Vegas home for the last 10 years.
Last 13 years. Yeah.
13 years. So take me what went through your night when you found out this started going on.
It was really odd because I'd gone to bed. We're 2 hours ahead of Vegas, so I think it was around 12:30 my time, maybe 12:45, somewhere in that area. I got a text message from a friend of mine, and she was actually at the festival, and she thought that she had seen me there, which she didn't. But she said, "Oh my God, are you still here?" And I said, "What?" I said, "No, I'm in Texas." And she goes, "I just saw you." And so she walked me through it. She said, "No, we're crouched down. We're over at the Luxor now." They had made their way over to the Luxor Hotel. And she kind of filled me in. And of course, I got out of bed and turned on the television and started looking online, and it was just pouring in all the information, people checking themselves in safe and things like that. And I started reaching out to friends that I figured were there, and a lot of my friends, as you said, were actually at the event itself. I had some friends that were working there, some in security, some in promotion, and then I had some friends that worked at the concession bar there, and then a lot of friends that were actually there, just to see the show. So it was pretty scary. It was surreal, to be honest with you.
Did you feel quite helpless with what was going on, you being in Texas and not in your home city?
Yeah, I did. It was a strange feeling, actually. It hit home. It was kind of a, because of what I do and because of the things I write about and cover on Rebel Planet and my interest in research and all these different topics of conspiracy theories and alternative narratives and, searching for the truth outside of what, the government or media generally tells us about events. I have a natural instinct or inclination when something happens, an event or a tragedy somewhere, to respond in a certain intellectual way, a certain curiosity way, right away. It's just, but it didn't, I didn't have that instinct with this, which was a little bit different for me. Because it just hit too close to home, and I was worried about people that were there on the ground. So, but subsequently since then, I've actually taken a little bit different stance than I would in other events as well. I don't, I've been extremely cautious not to talk about, conspiracy theories or things like that with this. Interestingly enough, I didn't have to, because right away, and this is one of the things that I found puzzling about this particular event, is that people on the ground, people that were at the show, people that were actually victims and that I know and I've talked to, these are people that I actually know in real life. And they themselves immediately had questions, things from, multiple shooters to, questioning, the official narrative, the timeline. Is Stephen Paddock actually a shooter at all? Was he helped? Just the gamut of questions. Like I said, I didn't have to really explore these questions in this event, and almost didn't have the stomach for it, to be honest with you. I felt a little bit odd even going down that road, but you know, I think it says something when the people who are actually on the ground at the event themselves immediately started putting these questions forward, and still are. I don't think their questions have been satisfied to their liking yet. So,
and I understand the emotions that go through that, because you must have been sitting there trying to call as many people as you possibly could to see if they were safe. I mean, your phone must have been going haywire all night long. And, you know, that feeling of helplessness, I think many of us had that exact same feeling during 9/11 when that happened, because we all wanted to try and, you know, help, but none of us really could. There was nothing we could do. And so as you started to try and figure out, you know, how you could help people out, Jamie, or help your friends out, what's going through your mind? Like, are you just going through your Rolodex and calling everybody and making sure?
Well, I was trying at first just to understand what the situation was. I didn't really have a clear understanding of exactly what was happening. But once I realized that it was at the Route 91 festival, and it was a country and western thing, and that it was across the street from Mandalay Bay, and then I'd gotten some information that a lot of people had been shot. My first thought was, I started thinking about friends that I thought would be at the show. So my natural instinct was to check on them. One of my first attempts was my buddy Tom Eisen, and he lived in Nashville for a while. He's a singer, and he works in the industry in Vegas now. And I thought, Tom's got to be at that show. I got to check on him. And he didn't hit me back until late the next morning. But I did post something on Facebook to let everybody know that please let me know that you're okay. And so many people immediately started checking themselves in as safe, which is, Vegas is interesting. It's, for a big city, it's a small city. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody, has everybody's number, and they keep in touch. And so, yeah, it's an interesting community. And, it's interesting. They've pulled together since then and really come together to support each other. I wish I was there to be a part of that, but they're doing all right without me. So.
And a person that I met through you, Jerry Reed, he has done a lot for the community to help raise money and all sorts of items, to help these people out to get their lives back. Everything from diapers to financial assistance. Explain how what you saw from the community kind of banding together to try and clean up and figure out what is happening, because I don't think when you look at Las Vegas, a lot of people forget that there's 2.5 million people that call the area home. And right. a lot of people just think of the Strip or the old Strip and the gambling and the partying that goes on, but for a lot of people, that hit home way too close.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the Strip is the lifeblood of Vegas. And there are a lot of entertainers there and performers, and we're a tight knit group, and everybody knows everybody. I think since then, as you mentioned, Jure has his social media freedom website up now, and he reached out to people and I think he's been active in some fundraisers. And my buddy Brandon Powers from Evil Pie, he owns Evil Pie. It's a pizza joint down on the Strip, and he's done a couple of things. I've had some musician friends of mine, Chris Giacchino and Todd Kearns, and just a ton of people doing benefit shows to raise money for the victims. And it seems like everybody's active in one way or another to kind of make sure that they get through this, It's good to see.
And with all your friends that are still there, is it still almost 3 weeks later on their minds, or is it something where, we as humans, we eventually drop the day's news and move on?
Yeah, they're still talking about it, and some of them, some of my friends were extremely close to what happened. Some of my friends were actually, like I said, at the show, working the show. I had a couple of friends that were actually hit. They weren't killed, but they were shot. And so, yeah, they're going to be dealing with this for a long time. A lot of people in a lot of different ways. But I had one friend who actually he was leaving the show. My buddy Mark, and Mark and I are really close friends. We used to hang out daily. And I was watching the news later the morning following the event, and there was, Mark on the news, him and his girlfriend, Lindsay, and apparently when they were leaving the concert, or after the shooting, they were trying to get out in their truck. And they ended up putting a lot of people in the back of their truck and used their truck as sort of an ambulance. And they took a lot of people to the hospital. Unfortunately, one of the people they ended up taking to the hospital died. But that's got to be hard on them, They may not. I haven't had a chance to talk to them since, but I'm sure they'll be dealing with that for quite a while. A lot of people will, in their own way. But Vegas is strong, and they seem to be resilient and dealing with it. I think right now, the people that aren't immediately suffering, in other words, victims. I think they're the people that may have been at the show, people in the community, people of that locals who have been following the press conferences and things. I think what's on their mind is they just want a motive. They want to understand why, and they want to understand why the official narrative is a bit sketchy. I think it's interesting to me that so many people that were so close to the event actually have so many questions. Like when I look at other events that I've questioned, different shootings, different bombings, different things that, may lend themselves to an ulterior narrative. You may think there may be some conspiracy to it. These are things that I've explored. Generally, the people on the ground are very tight-lipped. The people closest to the event, you don't really hear from them much, and if you do hear from them, they sort of just confirm whatever the official narrative is, But Vegas is a little different in that. There's so many people that were actually on the ground and close to the event and were actually victims and were there to see it and witness what happened. They're the ones who have the questions. And I find that particularly interesting.
And just reading some of the comments in the chat rooms, Marie in the Spreaker chat room actually had one of her friends killed in that incident, and Ron actually had a distant relation shot in the head.
Wow.
And I'm not sure if they survived, but I mean, it touched all over the world. I know 4 Canadians were killed in that, including someone from very close to my hometown in British Columbia, a young man at 23 years old. I mean, it affected everybody, and I apologize, Jimmy. I didn't know that you had friends who were actually wounded in this attack.
Yeah, I did. I had one of my friends was shot, and the bullet pierced his lung, and then I had another friend that was shot. She was shot in the ankle. Both of them are recovering, and they'll be okay. But yeah, it's and then interestingly enough, even here in Texas, right down the street, in the next little town over from where I am, the next little town, I think it's population, 20,000 or something. The police chief was actually shot. He was at that show, so that's interesting. It's just it did, like you say, there's such a connection around the world, and that was such a big event. I think there were 20,000 people there, so and there were over 500 people shot. So that's a big event. That's tragic.
Well, let's start off with what happened that night. So, as far as you know, give us a timeline on what you have learned through Rebel Planet News.
Well, that's the interesting part, is it keeps changing, and that I think that's one of the frustrating things for people, is that, you know, that timeline keeps changing. I believe, from what I can understand, the first shots fired, as far as I understand, were at the security guard that supposedly approached the room. And the reason that I understand he approached the shooter's room was because the door, a door was left ajar for too long. And those doors in those hotel suites and hallways have an alarm attached to them.
Are there any other indications, and maybe your connection?
And what happened was one of those doors on that floor were left open too long. I'm not sure if it was the door to his suite or if it was the stairwell door, but one of those doors was left open too long, and because it was left open too long, it alerted the security guard. So he went up to check on that. He was actually reportedly on a floor below, so he was on the 31st floor, and made his way up to the 32nd floor and found that the door leading to the hallway from the stairwell, from the emergency stairwell, was bolted shut. So he actually had to make his way back down to the elevator and come up that way. And then when he approached the door, he was reportedly shot through the door. So as far as I understand it at this point, he was the first victim. And then I believe it was 10:05 Vegas time that the shooting started in the crowd. So I don't know, you know, I think it's a little sketchy when he broke out the window. Supposedly he broke out the window with a heavy hammer, and two different windows that were about, I think they were 50 feet apart, 48 to 50 feet apart at least. And then I guess he started shooting out of one of the windows and then would make his way over to the other. That's the official report anyway. So
while the mass hysteria is going down, you know, we were trying to figure out, I think everyone was, who would do this. Was this a terrorist attack? Was this a Homeland Security issue? Was this a natural-born terrorist? Was it ISIS? And quickly, everybody was saying this was an ISIS event. Members of ISIS actually quickly took to social media to praise their shooter for committing this heinous action. Did you think it was a terrorist attack right off the bat?
No, I didn't. That wasn't my gut reaction. I don't think I don't know necessarily that I even framed up what I thought it might be. I guess if in hindsight, I think I just envisioned a crazy gunman, to be honest with you, and maybe I'd heard that by the time I started forming an idea of it, but no. I never, the terrorist narrative doesn't really make sense to me, even at all. And it didn't at any point in the narrative. ISIS, incidentally, actually, I mean, some actual news agencies were reporting that ISIS actually claimed responsibility for this early on. I guess an ISIS spokesman, I don't know where you find one of those on speed dial, but apparently they found one, and they claimed responsibility for it. But that doesn't make sense to me at all. You know, it just doesn't seem like something that a terrorist organization would do. I don't know why specifically. It just doesn't seem like their MO. You know what I mean? And the fact that came out as a, I think, I'm not sure, I want to be cautious, I don't want to name a news agency, but I think there were several of the big ones were reporting that ISIS actually had claimed responsibility. And I don't know, my instinct just immediately rejected that. I'm like, nah, that doesn't make sense to me. So.
Well, it's very easy for them to get their name back in the press to continue that fear. Would you agree with that?
Well, if we're going to go down that road, yes. You know how I feel about that, absolutely. I think that there is a lot of fear-mongering, and as far as I'm concerned, those groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and those groups have a very, very shaded history, and there's a great deal of indication in my research that those groups have been actually started and funded by our own CIA and other agencies within our government, and for one reason or another. Not to say that there aren't radicals in the world who adopt that ideology and sign on post facto, but we do know that a lot of these groups were started for other reasons, to do other things in the world, and then from that grew into radicalized groups. I don't think, honestly, my opinion, I'll just say it now, I don't think ISIS acts on our soil or would act on our soil under that name without direction from the CIA. That's the way I feel about it. I don't. If there was ever a quote unquote ISIS event in the United States, I would venture to say that that they didn't just sneak under the radar. Let's put it that way.
We're going to get more into the details of the shooting as the night goes on, but it all turned to a very wealthy man named Stephen Paddock, who, by all intents and principles, was a millionaire, a little bit of a loner, never seemed to have a violent bone in his body, didn't have a police record, no mental insecurities, just a normal, everyday guy, retired, really didn't need to do this, that just seemed to snap and make all of this happen. What have we learned about Stephen Paddock?
Not very much. Interestingly enough, within the first hour of me finding out about this, I have a friend, and I won't mention his name, but he can access information and databases very quickly, like extremely quickly from his home computer. And once the news, I believe it was the sheriff's department came on the news, and once they had announced the girlfriend's name, as soon as they did that, within minutes, he said, "I know who the shooter is." And I said, "Who?" He goes, "It's Stephen Paddock. It's a 64-year-old man." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, he goes, yeah, it's Stephen Paddock. Now, he hadn't even looked on Facebook. He hadn't done anything. He had another way of, I won't say how he came on that information, but, it was a database search, basically, property search, that kind of thing. But as soon as he said it was 64, I said, 64? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me at all. And the more we've learned about this guy, the less we've learned about him, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't really have, not a whole lot of people know much about him. There's been a few of his neighbors said that they hung out with him, but, they said he was always, although he was pleasant and nice, everybody that seems to have known this guy says he was a nice guy. They couldn't imagine him doing this. They said that he wasn't necessarily a philanthropist, but he was generous and he was helpful. And in other words, the personality that they knew the guy as wouldn't fit somebody's character who they could imagine doing this. But then again, we always hear that when somebody, does something horrendous. So I don't know how much that means. But aside from the trivial encounters that they had with him, they don't know much about his life in depth. Even a few of his neighbors said that they were actually inside of his home at one point, and he had given them permission to use his garden tools and his lawnmower and things like that when he went on vacation. So he had left them a key to his house. And when they said, when we went into his house, there was hardly anything in there, just very few pieces of furniture, a few things on the wall, but it was really, really sparse. They said it didn't feel like it was a home at all, just a few things. And a few things in the garage. He said we couldn't tell if he was moving in or moving out, or if he actually lived there. It didn't make sense. The way they described it was, it didn't look like it had been made a home. There weren't a whole lot of belongings. It didn't look like anybody was staying there very long. So,
we do know that he was a gun aficionado, always had been. We do know that he drove a minivan. He didn't like to flash his money, even though he was big into buying and selling real estate, commercial and apartment buildings. This is someone who, instead of paying somebody to look over his apartments, he would move into the apartment himself. We also know, sorry, Jamie, that he didn't like people very much either.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I caught you. You caught me off guard with the gun aficionado thing. And that's actually, I have the things I've researched, that does not wash. He actually, a lot of people, including his girlfriend, wasn't even aware that he had a stash of guns. That seems to be a surprise to the people that were closest to him, is that he would even have those weapons in the first place. Not to say they're telling the truth, but the people close to him and knew him said they never saw weapons. They didn't, they never saw a cache of weapons and ammunition and bump stocks and these things laying. They never saw that, and he did not have a reputation for being a gun aficionado. He that wasn't something that he was known to do or known as. So that's the one thing that I've not heard. I mean, I heard that he had a cache of weapons. Of course, they said yes. At his home, they discovered a whole lot of weapons in Mesquite, Nevada, and then of course in the hotel room there were reportedly a whole lot of weapons found in there. But the people that knew him were not aware of any gun collections or his interest in guns or anything else. In fact, one of his neighbors, who was his neighbor for about 7 months, it was actually a Marine sniper, and that neighbor has since moved away before the shooting, but he's spoken out, and he was actually on another radio show, and his comments were interesting because he said, again, he only had trivial encounters with Stephen Paddock, and they were generally around a slot machine near their home, and they would both go there and have a few drinks and occasionally talk and play slots. And they would talk about various things, and he said that the topic of guns was not one that Stephen was really engaged in. He didn't talk about weapons, and even after the Marine revealed that he was a sniper and guns were his thing, he said that Stephen didn't react and show any real interest in guns at all. So I found that to be interesting.
There was talk, though, that he had visited a lot of rifle and armament stores leading up to this, especially over the last year or two. I mean, to acquire that much ammunition, he had more ammunition than most hunters do.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like he was prepped for war. Let's be honest.
There's been, again, and see, this is one of the things that's interesting to me that because that narrative about him going to different gun stores and collecting all of these weapons and this ammunition, but I haven't heard any gun shop owners confirming that, or anybody that's close to him confirming that. That's in the official report, but that's one of the problems that we have here, is that nothing can be confirmed. And there's also been, they said that he, over the course of 3 or 4 days, he had been taking these weapons, a little bit at a time up to his room. But they haven't released any video footage to show that. So I found that interesting. That, I'm basically at this point parroting questions that other people have presented that have not yet been satisfied, and that some of these things you're mentioning, especially around the weapons themselves, that there's a lot of questions about all of that. A lot of questions about the actual weapons themselves, all the way, how did he acquire them? Where did he store them? Why would he take so many up to a hotel room for this? If which is, I personally, I find that extremely interesting myself. Why would you take that many? I think there were 47 weapons that he's supposed to.
Well, apparently he had 42 or 43 weapons, and 23 of them were in the hotel room.
Okay, so the 23 weapons. One of the I heard another Marine that I talked to, and he invited me to listen to him on another talk show, a totally different guy. And one of the things that he presented a lot of things because he had his own questions. But one of the things that he put forth was, he said, I don't understand if even if you're a deranged human being who has your mindset on, doing something terrible like this, and you're going to make your way up to the top of a hotel and take out as many people as you can. He said, you don't need a whole lot of guns. You just need a whole lot of ammunition. He said, you might, if you're really putting that much thought into it, you may put enough thought into it to bring a few different weapons in case one jams or something like that. He said, I don't know how clearly a madman is thinking. He said, but if your goal is to fire ammunition, certainly you would want a lot of ammunition. But why would you need that many weapons? It just doesn't fit any path of any logic whatsoever. Even within the realm of a psychotic person wanting to commit murder. Because you have to think about the psychology, because you either have to follow one path of psychology or the other. In other words, if you're deranged and you want to kill as many people as you can, and you plan this event out, then you're planning it. It's a premeditated, planned event, which apparently it was, right? But if you're going to be that diligent about planning, why would you bring 23 different weapons? There's no way that you're ever going to use 23 weapons. I mean, and apparently he had just as many at his home. So if he just wanted to be surrounded by weapons, why didn't he bring them all? It's a very odd thing to have a hotel room full of weapons that you're not going to use. I could see bringing more ammunition, but bringing more weapons, that just doesn't make sense to me. And especially when they showed the images on the news, it almost looked to me like they were trying to present a room full of weapons, and it just looked like this gallery of weapons. Look at this big scary rifle over here, and look at this big scary thing over here, and and they were all around, there were in other rooms inaccessible to him. it's a very odd thing to really contemplate why there were so many weapons, even from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to commit this crime, I'm going to do this horrible thing. Why would you need so many weapons? It's just a peculiar thing to me.
Jamie, there's a lot of people who have asked a lot of questions about what would cause him to snap like this. And a lot of times when we've seen people snap like this immediately, and I'm not trying to get conspiratorial here, but a lot of people wonder if it has to do with any type of government program, whether it's MK Ultra or he was a Manchurian candidate type person. Did you look into that at all?
Of course, yeah. I mean, obviously, and I think it's way too early to start, entering too many theories without substantiating anything. But, I am looking into it. We're looking into it. But my instinct usually on any type of event, anything big in the news, especially when people are injured, is to explore alternative theories and narratives, not because I automatically reject any official narrative, not because I'm trying to be irresponsible or conspiratorial. I think that's not a good thing to do. However, as a matter of practice and a matter of exercise and a matter of journalism, one of the things that I think that we should do always is always ask questions, always explore what's happening. And I think that's important because I think that history has proven that the media at best doesn't always get the official story right, correct? And then at worst, sometimes there's other things at play. Sometimes the narrative is actually colored, manipulated. Sometimes they're not telling us the truth, or the agencies that are feeding them the information are not telling the truth. History has proven that. So I think as responsible investigators, journalists, writers, bloggers, citizens, I think it's incumbent upon us to ask questions, and I encourage that always, to explore things like that. And in this case, like I indicated earlier, because it hit so close to home, and where it's somewhere I called home for the past 13 years, and friends of mine were actually there and injured and affected by this, I've been extremely cautious about my thought pattern with it, the things I say, the things I write, etc. I almost just kind of let things unfold without really diving into it with any preconceived notions. I just kind of have been watching it unfold and exploring things as they unfold. But, there are questions that other people have posed that I find extremely intriguing. The age of the guy, you said, well, what would cause someone to just snap who otherwise seemingly wouldn't fit this character? I don't know. There are all kinds of reasons why a human being could snap. Maybe he was politically motivated. Maybe his girlfriend had broken up with him. Maybe he just found out that he was dying. I mean, you could go down the list of a million possibilities of why someone, may lose touch with reality. From what I understand, it's been reported that he had recently been taking some new prescribed medications that may affect him in certain ways. So the possibilities, are kind of endless. But even if, again, you have to check and balance things, right? So let's say that, well, this guy snapped, right? You use the term snapped, right? Well, snapping to me is one of those things where the way I interpret somebody snapped means they had a mental breakdown or begin to have delusions, or in other words, something's just not right. Their thinking is not right. And if you use the term snapped, that means that now they're in a different place than they normally would be. So if this guy normally was a sane human being, and this would be something totally outside of his character, and then all of a sudden he quote unquote snapped, and now he is in the frame of mind for whatever reason to do this, okay, that sounds like a crazy person, right? And a crazy person generally operates on a certain path of logic, whether it be for 30 seconds, and they turn their car into traffic and commit suicide, or whether it be for a couple of hours and they go into a state of psychosis and jump off of a bridge or hurt someone, or if they plan something for weeks, months, years, and, execute something. But either way, you have to contemplate how much planning went into something. And the story that's being presented to us is a little bit odd, no matter how you slice it. Here's a guy that was a professional gambler. He had a little bit of apparently some work in real estate. He made a lot of money. Apparently, he also worked for Lockheed Martin, which is a defense contractor. So there's kind of really a really unclear picture of what he's been doing with his life in the later years. When he retired, there's a lot of overlapping stories as to what this guy was really doing with himself. It seems like he was just spending his days nowadays gambling and traveling from his few homes back and forth with his girlfriend. But nevertheless, the people that knew him only knew that about him, and everything seemed to be in order. Nobody says, "Oh, this guy was a crazy guy." I haven't heard anybody that's quote unquote knew him say that. So the snapped idea would certainly fit into the official narrative. In other words, this is a guy that seems okay, and he snapped, and now he's done this horrible thing. But if we're going to assume all that, then we still need a motive, because planning requires a motive, even if you're crazy. You know what I mean? Like he could be having delusions that some fairy godmother was instructing him to do something, which obviously wouldn't be real, but it's a motive. You understand what I'm saying? So far, there's been no motive put forth, and everyone has to have a motive for something, especially when that much planning is put into something, because I don't think you just acquire that many weapons and keep them hidden from people and nobody knows that that's the thing you're doing, and then finally you decide to go out and commit mass murder and on this big of a scale. That's a whole lot of planning. That's a lot of planning. That's a lot of motivation. There has to be something within this person that's motivating him. And nobody has been able to extract that. According to his brother and his family and his girlfriend and those that knew him, he doesn't seem to be a particularly political guy, a particularly religious guy. He wasn't ranting and raving, apparently, about anything in particular. There seems to be no motivation put forth, even in the official narrative. And I think that's really odd. That's a really odd thing. So...
Yeah, and I also find it interesting that just days before, he had wire transferred $100,000 over to his girlfriend, who was almost forced to go on a trip to Thailand. And just so you know, we only got about 2 minutes before we got to go to break.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle, too. And I've heard a few different theories on that, a few different ideas. But... yeah, and even his brother, I'm sure you've seen those wacky interviews of his brother those are some of the strangest interviews I've ever seen with anybody. But he addressed that in one of the interviews, the money, the $100,000, and but it did seem like there would have to be some kind of motivation, and apparently she knew nothing, which of course even if she did, I'm sure her initial story would be to say she knew nothing, but we haven't heard much. There's been, as far as I'm aware to date, there's been no real story from her come forth about the $100,000, why she went there. None of that's really been told to us yet. And it seems to me like there would have been at least some sort of general explanation for that part of the story. But even that hasn't been disclosed yet. So I don't know. There's a lot of really weird parts to a lot of weird angles to this story.
Jamie, I'm going to get you to hold on here as we are going to step out for our first break of the night. Jamie Sexton is our guest tonight from Rebel Planet News, and we are talking about the Las Vegas Massacre that left 58 people dead, over 500 wounded, including a couple of Jamie's friends. We're going to get more into Stephen Paddock, Marilou Danley, and was there more than one shooter? It's a very interesting story. Not a lot of details as of yet, but we are going to get into them in the next couple of hours as well as we continue on with Spaced Out Radio. Jamie's going the distance as he does the third Thursday of every month right here on the SOR. We'll be back right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruse, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, the crypto guru, Ronald Murphy, is back, as we'll get into everything spooky leading up to Halloween in just 10 days' time. It'll be a lot of fun. We will get into it with the Crypto Guru tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, in over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Joe Allgaier has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club in lieu of Bill Cardwell, who was taking in a Steely Dan concert tonight. Tractor. Tractor is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Joe and Bill set the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you're wanting to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also join us for live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. You can tune us in on TuneIn. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, and you can download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. You can also shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, rock out to some Bumblefoot, read The Encounter online, or watch UFO Seekers or Contact TV videos, everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, we are talking with Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News. Jamie joins us the third Thursday of every month to talk about the news behind the mainstream news. Tonight, we are talking about the massacre in Las Vegas on October 1st. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Yes, sir.
We just scratched the surface on Stephen Paddock in hour number 1. And recently, there has been photos from inside his hotel room released by the FBI. I'm not sure how real this one photo is, but there is a headshot of him where he committed suicide with his own gun. Now, a lot of people will say this looks very, very detailed. The flooring is the same, the room looks the same, so on and so forth. However, it was also known that Stephen Paddock had the number 13 tattooed on his neck, yet in this photo, there is no number 13 on the neck of the deceased inside the hotel room. I'm wondering, with Photoshop, that could have been easily erased. I'm wondering if you believe this is a true photo, or if somebody has photoshopped it to make a conspiracy happen here. What are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure that he had the number 13 tattooed. I know there was one photo that they keep comparing that to of him with the supposedly the number 13 tattooed on his neck. Very, very poor job if that was a tattoo. But that's the only photo that I've seen of him with the number 13, if that's what that actually is, on his neck. Every other photo I've seen of the guy, and there aren't many, he does not have that. And I would question, actually, one of my friends is a Photoshop expert, and she says that it looks like his neck was photoshopped. And I do a lot of graphics myself, especially for Rebel Planet. In the earlier stages of design, I was doing graphics a lot to get that right, and so there does seem to be some pixelation around that area. However, one would have to question, if it was a conspiracy, how would it play into any conspiracy for them to remove the 13? Because they're not trying to say it's not Stephen Paddock. They're trying to say it is Stephen Paddock. So it doesn't really make sense that if Stephen Paddock at some earlier date did have the 13 on his neck, that they would want to Photoshop the number out. It would seem almost the other way around. In other words, if that were a staged photo and it was an actor, and they were trying to make Stephen Paddock, who did have the 13 on his neck, a patsy. It seems to me they would Photoshop the 13 on his neck, not take it off. So I have heard the whole 13 tattoo thing. I've looked into it, and at this point, my sense is that he never had the 13 tattooed on his neck. I've seen the photo. I see the 13 that people are talking about, but I don't think anybody would get that crude of a tattoo right on the front of their neck of a 13. That would be very poor tattoo work unless you're in prison. And I'm not convinced that he ever had a tattoo. Let's put it that way.
Let's get to some questions from our audience because they are starting to build up. On Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio, TechMan is asking, have you heard about the story about someone breaking into Paddock's home just a week ago?
Yeah, I did hear that. As far as I'm aware, nothing was taken. But his home is under surveillance. So how someone would break in, I'm not really sure. Because the FBI is involved in this investigation, and they have people stationed at all points of this investigation right now, including the security guard that worked for Mandalay Bay. They had one of their agents stationed in front of his house until he appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and that was an FBI agent, although he was posing as a security guard for a private firm. The private firm he supposedly was with doesn't actually exist. So, and he was covering up his badge. So, but to your point, yeah, I heard about it. What, did the caller have a further part of that question?
No, he was just wondering what you had heard about it. And we'll get to a second question from TechMan at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter.
Okay.
Jamie, what do you know about the company Volant Associates? Apparently, they have one of Stephen Paddock's old planes.
I haven't been able to find anything out about that. I read one thing about that, probably the same thing that your listener did. So far, I've been able to extract nothing out of that. But yeah, they supposedly have one of his old planes. I don't even think he owns it anymore. So,
yes, apparently he gave up his pilot's license after he turned 60 or something along those lines because he had to renew it every 2 years or something like that and just didn't feel the need to do that, didn't want to go through that. Let's get to...
Well, I think it had to do with his insurance. To renew the license, you had to keep the insurance up to date, which he failed to do. So he just let all that lapse, yeah.
Well, let's get to some more questions from Twitter. Sailor is asking, if he shot through the door to hit the security guard, why didn't we hear of any bullets traveling into other rooms?
Well, supposedly the door that he shot through was a double door. And as you know, Dave, those suites are pretty big and those hallways are pretty big. So I don't know. I mean, if he was shooting straight through, it's possible that he shot all the way down the hallway and the bullets didn't go into other rooms. But they probably had to end up somewhere, maybe in the elevator shaft or something. So I don't know. That's a good question.
Let's get to Andrew's question here. He is saying the Las Vegas coroner's office is under lockdown as of right now. Why? If the shooter is dead and there was only one shooter, then why?
Well, I actually know somebody that works with the victims' bodies, works in that office, and I talk to him regularly. He's a really good friend of mine. So part of the reason is because it's an ongoing investigation, and the bodies themselves, some of them are still considered evidence at this point. So that's one of the reasons.
Oh, so they haven't released all the bodies yet?
No, no.
Do we know if they have them all identified now? because there was a point where I believe there were still one or two that they couldn't find identification for.
I believe they have at this point. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think they are. Yeah, because there was a list of 58 names. So as far as I know, yeah.
Let me get to Trip in the Spreaker chat room. He is saying, where's all the bullet shell casings in the photos? There doesn't seem to be as many as he fired.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because as far as I'm aware, the pictures that were released to the public of the hotel room, and those were released fairly quickly. I think by the next night after the shooting, if I'm not mistaken, those photos were released. And and as far as I understood it, those initial photos, including the photo you were referring to earlier, the suicide photo, those were actually evidentiary photos. In other words, they were taken by the investigators themselves, which is odd to me why they would even release those to the public in the first place, especially the suicide one. But I also question that, and a couple of friends of mine who are, gun experts, that was one of the first questions that they had. I mean, very early on, that was one of their my buddy Ron hit me up and he goes, you see anything wrong with those pictures? And I said, a couple of things. Yeah, what are you talking about? He said, where's all the brass? And I said, He goes, I only see about 200 rounds. He said, if this guy fired 2,000 rounds, that entire hotel room floor around those windows would be just brass everywhere. I don't know. Although if you look at some of the ways these, sometimes a rifle that was not meant to be a fully automatic rifle doesn't necessarily have the same ejection process of the casing that an automatic rifle does, a fully automatic rifle. Some rifles, like a SAW, will shoot some of their casings a little bit forward. So I guess it's possible that, I mean, you could hypothesize that some of the shells went out the window, or maybe they swept them up. Although if it's an ongoing crime scene, I don't know why they would sweep them up and then take pictures. I don't know. But that is a legitimate question that a lot of people have had. Where is all the brass? Because there should be a lot more shell casings laying around.
Well, the other option is if he hung out the window to shoot, those shell casings could have easily fallen to the ground.
Yeah, and on that point, I guess I wanted to talk on this point too. Again, I don't know if anybody's ever, stood at that elevation, like if you're standing on the edge of a cliff at that height, or if you're standing in a vacant building or on top of a building or anything else. When you get up to that kind of elevation, wind is strong, and especially vacuum wind. And those hotels are pretty tight. In other words, they're sealed off pretty good for, efficiency. When you open a window or crack a window or break a window at that height, that many floors up, there's almost a vacuum effect near that window, especially if there's wind outside whatsoever. And if you look at the video footage, there was, decent amount of wind going on. You can see palm trees blowing around and things like that. I'm finding it very difficult to imagine a 64-year-old man, and we've seen some video of him. He looks pretty weak, holding a weapon that's not necessarily fully automatic. It's functioning as a fully automatic with the bump stock, but it's firing as a fully automatic. In fact, a bump stock is actually harder to hold. You have to fire a bump stock on a weapon. To make it fully automatic, you have to use two hands. You cannot shoot with one hand. You have to use two hands. So we're to believe that a 64-year-old man broke out a window at an elevation that high on a windy night, not crazy windy, but windy enough, like I said, and stood near the edge of this, very high elevation and used two hands to fire a very hard weapon to fire. Because this is not a fully automatic weapon. This is a weapon that's very crude. When you make it a fully automatic by putting that bump stock on it, it rattles your shoulder very bad. It hits you hard, much harder than a real fully automatic weapon would. Because the fully automatic weapons are designed to all of that mechanics happens, where it should happen. With a bump stock, all the mechanics that make it a fully automatic at that point are happening on your shoulder. So there's not a lot of stability when you fire a bump stock weapon, a modified weapon with a bump stock. So we're to believe that a 64-year-old man that wasn't in the best physical condition stood at the edge of a window and wasn't bracing himself with either other hand. He was having two hands firing this automatic. I don't know. It's just, the 64-year-old Rambo idea just doesn't wash very well with me. It's hard to imagine. And that's another suspicious thing for me. But if somehow he managed, sure, I guess it's possible that some of the shells may have dropped outside. That hasn't been discussed. But just the whole idea of this old guy doing this in the first place from a physical standpoint is highly questionable.
Well, we're going to get into the whole usage of the bump stock coming up in hour number 3. Tripp's next question is, what's up with the wet spot on Stephen Paddock's chest in the photo where it showed he committed suicide from a gunshot wound to the head? Do you think it's just sweat from the night's actions, or do you think it's something more?
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that. Some people tried to imply that maybe it was gunshot, which is, could be. Who knows what the guy had on his shirt. There's definitely something there, but I don't think we can tell from the photos what it is. But, the idea that he might have been shot in the chest is an interesting one, because some of the first reports that I was getting is that when they breached the room, he actually was alive and firing back, and they actually shot him. Those were some of the first reports that I had heard. And then quickly that narrative changed, and they said, no, he was already dead when they got in there. So that story was one of the major standout points that changed in the story, and started raising flags for people. That was an odd one.
Well, let's get to it. Apparently, he fired over 2,000 rounds in a span between 9 and 11 minutes. Obviously, he hit over 560 people, 58 of them dead. Right. You mentioned that he wasn't in the best shape of his life, and at 64 years old, let's face it, what does the odd machine gun weigh? 15 pounds? Somewhere along those lines, maybe a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit heavier. I mean, to hold a machine gun at that angle for that length of time with that amount of firing going on, those guns are not made for automatic. They are made for semi-auto, but you put the bump stock on, it becomes like an automatic rifle. It could have done more damage to the gun as well. So do you believe then that there is just something a little strange with the one-shooter theory?
Well, I think there's a lot strange with the one-shooter theory. But, to be responsible about some of these questions, to use what you just explained as an example, I'll show you what I mean. You say, well, that the gun is hard to shoot. Yes, it is. And that he shot for 9 minutes, but it wasn't consecutive, right? There were breaks. So you say, well, he wasn't shooting for 9 minutes straight. He was taking breaks, because if you listen to the audio and you listen to the eyewitnesses, there were short breaks in between. So theoretically, you could argue that someone could shoot, a series of rounds and then pause and then pick up another rifle, maybe one jammed. I mean, for all of these theories, you kind of have to counterbalance it when you're thinking them through about, well, maybe he did this and maybe he did that. At the end of the day, though, just the whole general picture of what you're describing is, and as I, also suggested, that, yeah, it is odd that an old guy was putting this much physical effort into doing what he was doing, with, I hate to use the term success, but, in his sinister deeds, he did manage to wound a lot of people. I would think that for someone in his condition at that height, under those circumstances, as you suggest, firing that particular weapon with a modified bump stock on it, etc., I think that, that would be difficult to do. Of course, if you listen to witness testimony, they claim that there were rounds hitting all kinds of things. Now, some people would argue, well, that definitely means there were multiple shooters because there were bullets going in all directions. But you could also argue, well, that's because he wasn't controlling that weapon very well, and bullets were bouncing off of everything in sight. So, and I'm not discounting one way or another. I'm just saying, when you examine these talking points, you kind of got to, to be responsible about it, you kind of have to challenge yourself, once you start down a path of saying, well, this is odd, maybe it was this, and maybe it was that. But the overall point, I do agree with. It seems extremely odd that someone of his age and physical condition, with apparently not a whole lot of training in firearms, could handle that kind of physical exertion, doing that kind of thing, especially at that height, at that window like that. And even breaking the window is suspicious to me. Even that part of it is very odd to me, because they showed the hammer that he supposedly used, and it was a handheld sledgehammer, a small sledge. And man, I don't know, man. I guess you could break one of those windows, but those windows are over an inch thick, double paned, hurricane proof windows, and they don't open. They don't have any opening mechanism on them, but they are, shatterproof and all kinds of things. And I just can't imagine that, they would be that easy to break, even with that little hammer, for an old guy. It seems like it would be a lot of work to knock those out. Not only that, but he knocked them out and had a hole big enough to do his dirty work through before the shooting even started. And not one window, but two windows. And, they say, well, the security guard responded because an alarm went off that the door was ajar. Well, nobody reported what? Nobody reported that two giant windows were broken out with a hammer before that. So that's odd to me. That's to me, that's another odd point. Those windows and how they were supposedly broken.
Jamie, I always thought the windows were alarmed somehow.
Yeah, they are as well. The windows are also alarmed. They're alarmed to heat. There's actually a heat sensor on those, and there's also an air sensor on those windows. So, alarm is supposed to go off if those windows are breached for any reason. But I've heard no reports of security being alarmed or alerted because of a broken window. From what I understand, Jesus Campos, the security guard that was shot and responded first to the room, responded because of an ajar door. Nothing about the window, which again I thought was an odd thing. It's like at some point he had to break these windows, which would be extremely loud. And I've heard a lot of people talking about, oh, I had the room down the hall, and I heard the shooting and this and that and the other thing. But nobody's talking about they heard the windows being broken. Nobody down on the ground level said they saw or heard or noticed windows being broken. Not one, but two. And those windows are very large, very thick, very heavy, very large. And I would imagine to break them out, even with a hammer, you're not going to do it in one whack. It's probably going to take you a whole lot of chipping away at that window to have it break. So that's a lot of energy and a lot of effort for a 64-year-old guy.
Do you believe that there were other windows broken? There was video footage from a taxi cab that looked, that there was another shooter firing from a lower story as well. And then obviously other windows would have had to have been broken.
Yeah, no, I do not. There's been no photos of other windows broken or open. Mandalay Bay does, on that side of the building, does have two windows that are discolored. They're near the center and higher up on the building. And the glass, for whatever reason, and it's always been that way, are just slightly discolored. And if you fly over in a helicopter or anything else, those two windows always look discolored from the others. Maybe they were replaced at some point. I don't know. But people tried to post those and say, why was glass missing here? Well, it wasn't. It's just two windows are discolored. As far as the shooter on the lower floor, I don't know about windows. We'll get into the audio portion of this in a little while. But as far as the actual windows, there was, some video put forth early on of a flash, looked like muzzle flash from a lower window. And I even thought it was muzzle flash. But for that to be muzzle flash at a lower window, a window would have to be open or broken out. And there's been no photos put forth of a window broken out. However, if you wanted to follow the idea of conspiracy, because we definitely noticed a flash at a lower floor. That was captured on video, not just by the taxi cab video, but by a few others as well. So we do know that there was a flash at a lower floor, more towards the center of the hotel. And people said, well, that's just a flashlight or a strobe light or some sort of light. And it probably is just that, because like I said, if it was a gun, if what you were witnessing was muzzle flash, fair enough, but the shooter would have to be either on the outside of the building, which is possible, or a window would have to be broken out and missing. And we have no video or photos of another window at that height or a lower height being out of the hotel. So I'm not sure about that. But then you would say, well, what was that flash? I don't know. But if you wanted to follow the idea of conspiracy, there could be a conspiratorial reason why that flash was there. I've kind of followed that line of path, and I thought, well, if you were an organization and you had real shooters stationed and you didn't want to draw attention to those shooters, maybe you set up a strobe light at a lower elevation while the shooting is happening. You know what I mean? And people are focused on that instead. Maybe it's a misdirection. See what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that's what it is. I have no information about that. But, it's just a way to kind of understand why was that light there. I don't know if that was muzzle flash or not, but I don't believe it was coming from a window. In other words, I don't believe a shooter was in another room at a lower floor, because for that to be the case, we would have to have another open or broken window for that to be the case. I'm not discounting the idea of multiple shooters at all. In fact, my thinking is kind of leaning to there probably was. And all of the witnesses that I personally know who were there that night who I've talked to do support that theory. That's their idea. They've told me in their own words, Jamie, I was there. I know there was more than one shooter. They're not telling us everything. Those are their words from several people. And so I'm not discounting the idea of multiple shooters, but that just to address that light that everybody saw in the taxi cab footage, I'm not sure that that's what we were looking at. And I don't see that it was coming from a window that was broken out because, as the sun was coming up, there were no other windows broken out in that hotel but the ones on the 32nd floor.
Do you believe then that this was a false flag event?
Well, we do know that people were actually shot and killed. So in that sense, it's a real event. And to use the term false flag as we know it, in other words, an event with an ulterior motive, I do believe that it could be. Obviously, if there are multiple shooters, I would definitely conclude that. I usually judge these things, my own personal barometer for these types of events. I usually judge them by what the media does immediately following the event. And one of my litmus tests for that is when they start talking about gun control, all my red flags go up immediately. And they did exactly that in this case. I mean, we weren't 3 hours at the longest side of this into this story before, all of these major news networks were just drilling the idea of gun control into people. And that's always a red flag for me. A lot of people would probably argue, well, it just seems like a natural way to respond to it. No, not really. It seems a little callous and inhumane and odd to me that we're discussing politics and policy when the bodies aren't even cold yet. It's just very odd. And when they just hammer away, and then the news narrative just becomes about that and not about anything else. And we still don't have a motivation. We still don't have any real background on this guy. We still haven't heard from the girlfriend. We haven't seen any footage of the guy coming and going from the hotel, bringing all these guns up. There's a whole lot of missing parts to their narrative that they haven't provided. Yet we're all drawing the conclusion that gun control is a must, and they're just drilling that. So for me, I've learned over the years that whenever they start pushing that gun control narrative, and that's all they focus on, I get really, really suspicious about the false flag idea. In other words, was that the agenda the whole time?
Well, my friend, you and I could have one great debate on gun control.
Sure, I'm sure we could.
we may get into that, we may not, because, me being a Canadian who lives in a country that has a lot of gun control in this area, I am fully supportive of it, and we can save that conversation for another day, or we could get into that later. I have no problem going down that road at all. But when it comes to the fact that people are considering this to be a false flag, I mean, you talk about the fact that the bodies aren't even cold yet, and already, and I was watching my feed, we have people already making YouTube videos and posting YouTube videos about this being a false flag event. I'm still not sure if there was a second shooter or not. I'm really not too sure. You have people who were on the ground, who were there, who were injured in this event. Did any of them see a second shooter?
No, I started to say nobody's actually reported seen, but that's not true. There actually have been people who reportedly have seen second shooters. I haven't really heard their stories entirely, but I have heard people say that they saw a second shooter on the ground. And then there was some video that was put forth of what people were trying to say was a second shooter. And they were playing it in slow motion, and it looked like someone had a rifle in their hand, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there was another video I found. It was actually the same video, just better quality. And what you're actually looking at is a police officer wearing a yellow police vest. Now, in the slowed down, grainy version, it's so the quality of the video is so poor you can't even read the word police, but you can tell it's the same vest, and it's the same two girls running towards the camera, etc. It's the same footage. But I haven't heard anybody's full testimony about this, seeing second shooters. But what a lot of people have said is that what the reason, and the people on the ground, the reason they believe that there were second shooters is because they feel like they heard with their own ears shots coming from different directions, multiple guns going at the same time, not echoes, but multiple guns, and bullets hitting all different directions on all sides of that venue at the same time. So that's pretty powerful testimony from somebody who's actually in the event, as opposed to someone like yourself or mine that is not at the event. And since I do know these people, I have to take them at their word. Of course, you can't discount the idea that in a panicked situation like that, you may not get all the details right. But when you weigh that against the fact that it's not one or two people saying it, it's everybody I've talked to said that they don't feel like things are right with the official story. And I think just about all of them feel that there was more than one shooter involved. So that goes a long way with me. The testimony from those people who were actually there, that goes a long way for me. But we don't have any video, as far as I know, of a second shooter. We don't have any video of muzzle flash that's been confirmed muzzle flash from anywhere else. But then again, we don't have any video of muzzle flash from the 32nd floor either. And there is quite a bit of video that shows that elevation of the hotel while the shooting was happening. Like, in other words, you can hear the gunfire going and the camera is trained on the hotel, and you can clearly see that 32nd floor in the shot, and there's no muzzle flash up there either. So I don't know necessarily what that speaks to one way or the other. But I don't think there's been put forth any real tangible evidence other than eyewitness testimony of second shooters.
Do you find it strange that the security guard who was shot, Jesus Campos, kind of did a disappearing act and then just seemed to reappear on Ellen?
Yeah, I do. I do find it very odd. I think it was a matter of what I think it was a matter of was control. I think that these casinos are very powerful institutions, and they want to protect themselves. That's one innocent explanation for that, because he was scheduled to appear on Hannity, and he canceled that appearance and then wouldn't return any other calls. We also know that Ellen DeGeneres has a contract with MGM, who owns Mandalay Bay. So, in other words, she performs there. She advertises for them. She's even got slot machines, Ellen DeGeneres slot machines, on the casino floor with her face on it. So she has a good relationship with them. Let's put it that way. So maybe they just wanted to keep this in-house, have their employee on, under their control. I do find it odd that he had an FBI agent that was posing as a private security guard outside of his home, wouldn't return calls, canceled the contract to appear on Hannity, and then suddenly just pops up on Ellen with a bunch of diagrams and a handler. Did you notice that? He had another guy with him who was supposedly a building engineer who was sitting there. And I found it odd that as Ellen would ask Campos a question, occasionally the building engineer, if that's truly what he is, would reach over and rub Campos on the back as if he needed comforting, when there seemed to be absolutely no indication that he was having some sort of emotional moment that would require a back rub at that moment. But every time he got the back rub, he would pause in his speaking as if to change direction. And I may be reading into that a bit, but the body language was extremely odd to me. Like, this guy was, the other guy who was sitting on the couch is also an employee, like I said, supposedly a building engineer at Mandalay, and just happened to be one floor above, while Campos just happened to be one floor below. Yet we'd never heard of this building engineer guy until he appeared on Ellen on the same couch with Campos. So there's some oddity there as well. I find that very odd.
Question coming from Twitter here. This one comes from Andrew, and he is saying, Kimberly Suchamel, a survivor of the Las Vegas shootings, went on Facebook stating there were multiple shooters. She is now dead. She did have some kind of ailment, but the timing of her death is fascinating because she was very public about her story. Do you believe that this is possible if we have people coming out that are just dying? We've also seen a couple of key eyewitnesses pass away under suspicious circumstances as well already.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've heard that story as well, and we're actually following up on a few of those, to be honest with you, Dave, to figure out, were these people ill? Did they really die? Did they really exist? So we're still working on some of that ourselves over here. I'm following some of that up. I haven't been able to confirm very much of that, although I am familiar with Kimberly, so I am familiar with that one. And yes, she was outspoken. I didn't know her, but I do know a few friends of mine who were actually at the event who are very outspoken on their Facebook page. And I've had a few people tell me also that the police were actively collecting cell phones with any video footage, any audio, anything they could get for evidence. And anybody, the sheriff's department requested that anyone that felt they had something that they considered evidence to, share that with them. And I've heard a lot of stories that they actually took their phones and devices down to the sheriff's department, and they took it from them, extracted what they wanted, and handed their device back to them with nothing on it. All of their contacts gone, all of their pictures gone, all of their videos gone. In other words, they just wiped their devices. Now, these are people I actually know who have told me this, and it's more than one. And actually, that was reported on another talk show as well, so there probably is some validity to it. I don't know the circumstances of that. I haven't talked to the sheriff's department about it, but yeah, I did see the press interview where the sheriff's department requested people bring down their devices, and then, like I said, subsequently I've talked to some friends who actually did participate in that and say they got their devices back completely wiped out. So,
Alan is wondering why the CEO of Mandalay Bay liquidated all of his holdings in the hotel chain and MGM a week before the shooting, and then donated apparently a bunch of money, like around $14 million, to some Middle East group.
I didn't know that extent of it, and he wasn't the CEO. He was just one of the board members, one of the shareholders. But I think he cashed in $24 million or something. I'm not sure about the number. It could be way higher than that. But he wasn't the CEO. But yes, that is legitimate. A very large portion of shares was sold a week before. I didn't know about the whole Middle Eastern part of it and all that. I haven't heard that.
All right, I got a couple of questions from Joe here, and Joe's first question, and, you know, Joe has nice hair like you do, Jamie, just so you know. You two could have a major hair off. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, we're going to have to hit the runway. It's a hair off, you know. So let me get to Joe here. Las Vegas casinos have the best security in the world. There are cameras at every entrance in the lobby in the casino and in the hallways and elevators. How come there are no photos of this guy lugging all of this stuff up to his room?
Well, I will tell you categorically that if he was lugging this up to his room, or if anyone was lugging this up to his room, there are video and photos of that. No question about it. A lot of the, most of the casinos that I know of in hotels do not have cameras in the hallways. A few of them do, but most of them do not. They have them all the way up until the elevators. So, for instance, if you were staying on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, I believe when you get to 32nd floor, you step out of the elevator, there will be a camera covering that bay of elevator doors. But once you pass that common elevator area and go down one of the hallways towards the rooms, there are no more cameras. So there are not cameras inside the room, and there usually are not cameras down the length of the hallways. Those cameras are generally stationed around the elevator bays. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of high-quality cameras that not only have the ability to see your every move at every entrance and every gambling table and every other thing you do on the casino level, but they also have facial recognition. So if you're banned from a casino and you try to go in there with a fake mustache, good luck, because they're still going to be able to pick you out. So yeah, whoever lugged all that stuff up to that room, whoever did that, there is definitely footage somewhere of that. And one of the suspicious things is that they haven't produced that yet.
We're going to go for a hat trick of questions from Joe. His second question here is, on the original video when the shooting began, the cyclic rate of the weapon matches that of a larger belt-fed weapon rather than a higher cyclic rate of an AR-15. Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I've talked to a number of weapons experts. The thinking by the experts that I've talked to, they say that they don't believe that it was a belt-fed weapon. They believe that it was a drum. A drum would give you pretty much the same results as a belt-fed. I don't think you'd be able to distinguish, from what they say, from a high-quality drum and a belt. But for whatever reason, just going by acoustics and the physics of the acoustics, as your listeners suggest, the percussion of the firing, et cetera, and the thuds and other whatever other elements they were using to distinguish, they feel that it was a drum, not a belt, but a drum, which works essentially when the bullet gets to. When the round gets to the chamber, the way it passes through, as far as a drum goes, is very similar to a belt anyway. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Unlike a magazine, which works completely different.
And this leads to Joe's third question in a row here. We only got about 2.5 minutes before we got to go to break here. And Joe as someone who has studied mathematics in college and everything, so I take his word when he gets into a question like this. And he's got nice hair, and people with nice hair never lie. So he's saying simple math shows that if Stephen Paddock had 40-round clips and there were almost 600 people killed or injured, he would have had to hit someone with every single bullet while changing his magazines over 14 times. No one is that good. Sure, some of the people were hurt by spraining ankles or falling down, or single bullets hitting multiple people, but there's no way a single shooter would have been able to hit that many people in that amount of time. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, there's just way too many, connections between people and bullets in this case for me to believe that this was a 64-year-old guy struggling with a bump stock weapon at that elevation. I have a really tough time believing that Stephen Paddock did this. I haven't said that yet in this segment, but I do believe I'll just say it now. I don't know that this guy had anything to do with the shooting itself. In other words, the firing of a weapon. He may have been connected in a way, or maybe he was a patsy in a way. But my gut instinct on this is that this was an operation, and that. And like I said, I have nothing conclusive yet to back that up. But I'm just saying, at this point, my gut instinct, I'm having a real tough time believing that this 64-year-old guy broke out 2 windows with a hammer and caused this much damage with those crude weapons, modified, very difficult to fire weapons, and connected that many times. It's a stretch, and I think a lot of people are having a real tough time kind of processing all of the jagged edges to this story.
I'm going to get you to hold on, Jamie, because we are through 2 very quick hours here on Spaced Out Radio. We are talking the Las Vegas Massacre and the details along it. Jamie is a 13-year resident of Las Vegas. A couple of his friends were shot and injured in this horrific disaster that left 58 people dead and over 500 wounded on October 1st of this year. We're going to get more into it in hour number 3. There's a ton of questions from the audience. We are going to try and fit them all in, and we'll see where this goes. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, with Jamie Sexton from Rebel Planet News, who is here with us the 3rd Thursday of every month. We'll be right back.
We are getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Wachowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio. and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, the Crypto Guru is back. We're going to have a lot of stories leading up to Halloween. Stories that freak us out that the only way we can do it is with the Crypto Guru, Ronald Murphy. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Michael McNeil filling in for Bill Cardwell for tonight's password in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Sooty Sodomus. Sooty Sodomus is your password. Make sure you use it wisely. It's much better than tractor. Sooty Sodomus is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as we have a password set for you each and every night right here on the Mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. You could give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You could also join us for live chat during the show in the SOR Space Travelers group on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, tune us in on TuneIn, download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can read The Encounter online, rock out to some Bumblefoot, who, by the way, played in Las Vegas last night. You can also read up on The Encounter online or watch videos from UFO Seekers and Contact TV and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, the third Thursday of every month, we have Jamie Sexton on the show from Rebel Planet News. We are talking the Las Vegas shooting. It's the first time we've discussed this on this program in depth. Jamie is a 13-year resident of Las Vegas, recently moving just a couple of months ago down to the state of Texas, his home state. How big is your belt buckle since you moved back down there? Be honest.
Pretty heavy.
Have you found a good hubcap to put around your waist or what?
Yep, I did. I polished it up. Nice. Shiny and gleaming.
Nice. Good. A nice Hyundai accent or something along those lines. Is that what's rolling in Texas these days?
I think that's the popular thing. No, it's still Ford trucks down here.
All right. Well, we're having a little bit of fun with that, but we are on a very serious topic tonight with the Las Vegas shootings that happened on October 1st. 58 people dead, over 500 wounded, and some will be scarred for absolute life with some of the after effects of what went on from where they were shot. Horrible, horrible scene, and we're getting into the details quite heavy tonight with Jamie Sexton with the Rebel Planet News. Jamie, we got a lot of questions from our audience, and I'm just going to fire away here with you here. Lynn down in Australia is asking, Lindsay down in Australia is asking, how long was that room booked for? How many days prior was the room booked for Stephen Paddock to put all of that hardware in there?
You know, we've gotten conflicting reports on that, and I'm not even sure that the room was booked in his name. I do know that he, under his name, supposedly, he was issued, it is as standard in these major hotels, especially if you request it, 2 access cards. In other words, those are magnetic cards, for anyone that doesn't know, that will give you access to your room. You slip the magnetic card into the little card slot and your door will open. You can also, in some hotels, use that same card to access the parking lot. And you can also use that same card if you've paid for the upgrades to the spa or the pool and different areas of the hotel. It varies from hotel, but it's an access card. It's usually referred to as your room key. He was issued 2 of those in his name, and oddly enough, while he had the room, and I think that he had it at least 3 days, while he had the room, it was reported by the sheriff's department, actually, in one of their conferences, that someone other than him, used one of his cards to access the room. So I'm not sure where that went. I've heard no follow-up on that part of the investigation, but apparently one of his 2 access cards were used for access when he was not there. So to confirm that, they must have had video footage or something to show that it wasn't him.
Do you think that the CCTV footage from the hotel will ever be released?
Well, I will say this. Let me put it to you this way. I don't mean to be cryptic, but I know how these casinos operate, so I'm just going to put it to you this way. If you were a local or a visitor to Las Vegas and you took your car to one of the casinos and you used their parking lot, which does have cameras. Their parking lots do have CCTV cameras everywhere, CCTV cameras. And you came out of the casino back to your car, and your car was stolen or broken into or damaged or anything, and you approached that hotel and casino and let them know what happened to your vehicle, good luck trying to get that video footage. Good luck. You'll never get it. You'll never get it. Even for a fender bender, a broken window, somebody stole something out of your car, good luck. You'll never get it. I've heard that. It not only have I experienced it, not me personally, but several people, 2 people that I've been ridden with in their vehicles over the years. We've had issues. You're not going to get that footage. And, you know, when you think it through, it makes perfect sense. It's a liability issue. You know what I mean? I don't know in this case that would wash out the same way, but, you know, these casinos have a lot of money, and they are constantly protecting themselves in extremely powerful ways. So, to answer your question, I don't know if we ever will see that footage ever. I don't know how much control is being executed over that right now. I don't even know. I haven't even been able to extract how much control is being executed and by whom over this entire investigation. I don't know if you guys have noticed in these press conferences when the sheriff speaks, not only is he extremely nervous and disheveled, but he is being hawked by that FBI agent over his left shoulder. That FBI agent never stands more than 3 feet away from him and does not face the audience or the reporters. That FBI agent just watches him like a hawk, almost to make sure that he's saying the right thing. Now, obviously, I'm interpreting it my way, but to me, it looks extremely weird and bizarre. Not only the FBI agent and his body language towards the sheriff, but the sheriff himself. His body language is extremely bizarre. He does not look confident. He does not look in control. He does not look concise. His message isn't concise. There's nothing about these press conferences that makes me feel that there's a sense of confidence by the sheriff at all. It's a very odd situation.
Let's get to another question here from Twitter from Techman. Did you research any of the possibilities that there were suspected muzzle flash coming from the Tropicana as well?
Again, as far as I'm aware, there's been no video anywhere of muzzle flash. Now, as far as the Tropicana is concerned, I have seen a few videos by one guy, and I can't remember his name, who has put forth as far as I know, he's the only guy that's done it, put forth the idea that there might have been another shooter at the Tropicana. And in his video on YouTube, when he's trying to illustrate, with his finger, he's putting his finger out in front of the camera to show the viewers, and he points over at the Tropicana and draws a straight line from the Tropicana over to where the Route 91 festival would have been. It's not actually, that's a little bit of an illusion the way he's presenting that. Although technically as a crow flies, it is a straight line from Tropicana down Las Vegas Boulevard to that. But that's an obstructed view. There's billboards in the way. There's a lot of things that would have probably not been the most ideal place for a shooter to be. That would be a very long distance for a shooter with a fully automatic weapon. I don't believe anybody was at the Tropicana. My opinion, I don't think they were.
I really like this question from Andrew. He's one of our newer listeners on this show. He says, the shooting occurred in front of an Egyptian pyramid and obelisk. Could one conjecture that ritual overtones were present?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you buy into the whole New World Order concept and all of the trimmings that go with that, and you want to conjecture that it was some sort of New World Order or global government execution thing, sure, that they're very oddly enough, we see a lot of these events where some of that hokey stuff does seem to be a pattern. So I wouldn't dismiss it. I haven't really connected those dots yet. I haven't really gone down that path mentally or emotionally for me. Like I said, on this particular event, because it's hit close to home, I've tried to be more academic about things and operate at a slower pace at kind of analyzing these things. But yeah, it didn't escape me either that that's a consideration. But, if you're going to go down that road, that it was, the Illuminati, and we've talked about that before, whatever title you want to put on that and all of that. If you want to assume that it's that group, then this would definitely be a gun control issue. That is one of their absolute number one pinnacle motivations is gun control. So if it was that group, and I certainly wouldn't exclude that group from it. In fact, I might even lean that way. But if it was, that would definitely be their motivation for this. Wouldn't have anything to do with politics. It wouldn't have anything to do with terrorism. If it's that group, that would be exactly the motivation for this.
Let's get to another question on Twitter. George Soros investment fund bought puts on 1.35 million MGM stocks 2 months before the MGM Mandalay Bay shooting. How did the Soros investment fund know the MGM stock would fall?
Well,
just to interrupt you. Just to interrupt you there. It almost sounds the same thing as Larry Silverstein, reissuing an insurance order on a week before 9/11 that also included planes flying into the towers.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, if we're talking about Soros and we're talking about that much planning and forethought going into this, then that's the group it would be the same group, it would be the same group. And like I said, I if I'm going to entertain, if you pin me personally, and I'm speaking for me, not Rebel Planet News at this point, but this is speaking for me. If you pin me down, what does my instinct tell me at this point? If I had to gather everything that's going on and kind of draw some sort of hypothetical conclusion, on the far side, if I believe there was a conspiracy at this point, in other words, if I was going to say, well, I don't believe it's Stephen Paddock, this had to be multiple shooters, this had to be a planned event for some kind of motivation, I would probably package it and say this was a globalist agenda funded by people like Soros, well planned. Paddock was probably a patsy, and the end game to all of this was about gun control, which would be a familiar theme from these people, familiar face, familiar tactics, the whole bit. All of this could fit into that hypothetical narrative very nicely. I haven't seen anything to really exclude that possibility. On the other hand, I haven't seen enough evidence, in my opinion, to convince me of that yet either. We just don't have enough information yet, I don't feel, to draw a conclusion one way or another. I do know that there's enough holes in the official narrative to keep people asking questions, which I think is, as you and I always discuss, is a great idea. Keep entertaining ideas and theories. I think one of the things that frustrates me, because you and I have talked many times about the idea that and the importance of alternative media. What you do, what I do, and what other alternative media outlets do. The importance of that, in my opinion, is that we are free, especially in this age of technology with the internet and all these different ways to share information. We are able to really dig and explore things and share information and have a better chance of getting at the truth, instead of just having to rely on a very, very few media outlets that are controlled by corporate institutions. And I think that's wonderful. On the other hand, I think that we also have to be very responsible, not only as media people or alternative media people in doing that, but as people. In other words, if you're the person at home who wants to get at the truth, you want to get at information, because you want to know the truth. You want to know about the world you live in. You want to know about things that affect you and other things around you. Also, the way that you discern information, the way that you listen to information and process that information. I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to be very responsible in discriminating against the information that we're listening to. And don't just emotionally react to something and go, you know what, I think that's what it is. That's what it's got to be. It's got to be that. This guy said that and that makes sense, so I'm just going to go with that. I think a lot of people have a real knee-jerk reaction to do that. And it's easy to do, especially with the way some of these videos on YouTube and other information on the internet is presented. A lot of times it's extremely convincing. Mainstream media isn't the only one that can sell a story very well. Alternative media and even bloggers are getting very well at presenting information that sounds very compelling and very convincing. But just as I would suggest with mainstream media, we also have to do that as alternative media and as individuals. So, a lot of this information, you kind of got to just take your time with it and let it resonate for a while and weigh it out against other things that you hear and see. Sometimes it just takes time.
Well, once again, we can get into the whole gun control debate, but one of the things I was very interested in and actually quite surprised is after it was discovered that Stephen Paddock and the rifles he were using were all secured with bump stocks, to make the weapons act as if they were fully automatic, that the NRA, without even any argument whatsoever, actually said, yes, it's a good idea to banish bump stocks.
Well,
could you for people who are out there, can you explain what a bump stock is first?
Yeah, a bump stock is it's basically a modification that you can do to a semi-automatic rifle. And if you think about a semi-automatic weapon, which most all modern weapons, except for revolvers, and even a revolver technically is kind of semi-automatic, they all will fire as quickly as you can pull your finger, as quickly as you can pull the trigger. So if you could pull your, trigger finger, every 0.5 seconds, that's how quick they're going to go off. Most people can't consistently, fire off that many rounds with their finger. But the way a bump stock works is that it mounts to the stock of the gun, the butt of the gun, the rifle, the part that rests on your shoulder. And it's basically a spring mechanism, which when the weapon fires, the weapon has recoil. So the weapon moves back towards your body, towards your shoulder. And the spring in the buttstock sends it forward, and then that spring, that mechanism of going back and forth allows your trigger finger to activate those rounds and simulate a fully automatic weapon. So your body actually becomes part of the mechanism that normally a fully automatic weapon would have built into it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But the NRA did stand up and say, we got to look at getting these out of here.
Right. They didn't say, I was going to correct you, because they didn't say that we need to ban that. That is not what they said. What they said is that we need to review that again. But that's their decision. But no, they haven't. They have stopped short of saying that they need to ban those things. As far as I'm concerned, those are dangerous. Not necessarily because of what you can do with the weapon, but they're dangerous to the user, and they could screw up your weapon too. They're a crude mechanism. No serious gun enthusiast really likes bump stocks anyway, because they're not reliable, and most of the time, if you just want to go out and have fun on the shooting range with a modified weapon that's made to act like a fully auto, a bump stock is not very easy to handle. You're not going to be very accurate on the target because they just bounce around on your shoulder, and it's very crude. So gun enthusiasts aren't really excited about them anyway if you're serious about it. A lot of people like the novelty of it because, it can make it, I guess it, when you were kids, you used to put the playing cards in your spokes of your bicycle to make it sound like a motorcycle, and just silly modifications that men do to automobiles and weapons and toys and everything else. It's just one of those things. It's not a bump stock really has no practical use at all for anything. It doesn't really make a weapon any more fully automatic than your finger could, in theory.
Well, I understand that, but let's face it, a bump stock is made for one thing and one thing only, and it's killing.
No, that is not true.
Disagree with you.
No, well, let me correct you, because this is important.
Absolutely.
It is not made for killing. It is made to make a weapon simulate a fully automatic weapon. What a person decides to do with that, whether it be shoot rubber ducks or people, is up to the person. The gun, the bump stock is not made for killing. That's language that I cannot subscribe to. Guns are not made for killing.
Neither are cars.
Using that language is exactly.
And I will agree with you, okay, that it's not the weapon. Okay, it's not the weapon; it's the person who has something go twing in their head that they decide to all of a sudden do this. But one of the worries that a lot of people have is it seems like these people who snap figure they got to break the record now. Do you see what I'm saying? Like almost every major shooting now, it's the worst ever in U.S. history. You know.
Sure.
And it just seems like, you know, that all of these copycat type killings and shootings out there are only getting worse and worse and worse.
Okay, but I think we're entertaining the gun debate at this point. If we're going to do that, if we're going to follow that for a moment, I will answer that in this way. Maybe you're right. Maybe each shooting is getting worse. And I hate to trivialize it. I hate to diminish the tragedy of a shooting, obviously. I'm not trying to trivialize it in any way whatsoever. But no matter what you're talking about in the world, there's always going to be somebody somewhere down the line that's going to jump farther, ski faster, kill more people, whatever. I mean, that's an odds game. That's a numbers game. If you think that the world is getting more dangerous, that's another argument altogether. As far as the weapons themselves, if I'm going to presume that your argument would say, well, we need to look at weapons because people are getting more dangerous and they're trying to compete with killing numbers, so we need to adjust the weaponry in some way so that we can derail that, offset that, so that doesn't happen. That logic just never really pans out. It just doesn't, because murder is illegal. Not only is it tragic and wicked and awful and bad, but it's illegal. In other words, if you're going to commit murder, if that's in your mind and your heart and your plans, there isn't a law anywhere that you consider beyond reproach, because you've already come to the conclusion that you're going to take a life. So laws don't matter to you at that point. There is no law. And if you say, well, you make it harder for somebody to get a weapon, that may work in other countries where there's always been that difficulty of getting weapons, or way more difficult. In the United States, the same argument just does not apply here. We have to use a different set of logic, not a different set of facts, but a different set of logic, because there is a whole lot of variables to the gun debate in the U.S. And you look at somebody, let's assume for a moment that Stephen Paddock was the guy, okay, and he snapped, and for whatever motivation, he wanted to kill a bunch of people. Well, this guy was rich. He had over 40, almost 50 weapons, according to the authorities. And so, if that's the case, if he was that guy, he was going to do this anyway. There's nothing that's going to stop this as far as laws go, because somebody that's fixated on killing and someone that's fixated on breaking laws in the first place, laws are not going to stop you. Now, if you want to talk about practical things, and I assume that's the argument that the NRA would be considering at this point in regards to bump stocks, fine. I think that's an intelligent, intellectual discussion and a reasonable discussion. Like I said earlier, I don't think bump stocks are practical for any reason whatsoever. I don't think that they're made for killing. A lot of people are just weapon collectors. People like to target shoot. People like to hunt. There's a whole lot of reasons for things. And if we want to move aside from guns for a moment, there's a whole lot of things in this world that human beings like to own and have and possess and do that aren't really necessary, that could hurt us and could kill us. People like to do really risky things all the time. People like to drive really fast. People like to, you could follow that end until, you know what I mean? It just does. The long argument just doesn't work. I think what we need to think about when these things go down is reasonable, calm introspect, not knee-jerk emotional reaction and illogical things. And here's another thing. If we're talking about conspiracy or the possibility therein tonight about this particular shooting, and if the irony of this whole thing was, in reality, that this shooting was executed by institution or organization that was motivated to take guns away from people, that would be that's really screwed up. But I believe that that's happened before. I don't think this is the first time that would have ever happened. I think that there's been a lot of events to take our rights away. A lot. You know, you and I talked about your difficulty in traveling to the U.S. and how much it's becoming more and more of a pain in the butt for you after 9/11. You know what I mean? So those are freedoms that we used to enjoy that we don't quite enjoy as easily anymore. So I believe that there are forces at work that I don't believe it. I would put it past them to do very, very evil things to get their way. Let's put it that way.
Why do gun control laws work everywhere else?
I don't know that they do per se, to be honest with you. But, you know, you could argue that gun control laws have only been effective in areas where there weren't really a lot of guns or freedoms in the first place.
Okay, I'm gonna debate you here a little bit, and if you looked at me right now, I have a smile on my face.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, Canada has 1/10 the population of the United States, but if you average it out per guns, I believe there's 0.916 guns per person in Canada. So that means the equivalent of almost 30 million guns in Canada. Okay,
yeah, I'm aware of all the numbers.
All right. So my question is, and we'll just focus on Canada here for a second because we have very strict gun laws here.
Right.
Okay. So in the last 20 years, there have been 11 multiple shootings in Canada where there have been 3 or more people killed.
Right.
Okay, yes, the criminals will get their hands on guns. The deranged will get their hands on guns. It's not a matter when it comes to gun control of taking away guns.
Right.
Okay, but what does the average citizen in the United States need an assault rifle that has a 50 or 100 round clip on it?
Okay, let me answer your question this way. I find it insulting to human life when people start talking about numbers. You said there were 11 shootings where multiple people died, right? Those people count. I don't care if it's 1 or if it's 30,000. When somebody takes a weapon and kills somebody else, it's a horrible thing. It's a criminal act. It's wicked. It's not a good thing.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely.
So I don't, numbers don't mean anything to me. When people say, well, yeah, but the United States has so many more guns and so many more killings. Yes, but is that really the way to approach this? It's not about guns. It's almost, when you frame the argument, when gun control advocates frame the argument that way, to me, they are completely misdirecting what we should really be concerned about. Because what really motivates someone to kill is not the fact that there's a weapon there. Oh my God, there's a gun on the table. I should go kill someone. That's not logical. That's not the way.
It is logical, Jamie, because it's proven in every other civilized country where there is gun control, there is less gun murders. It's out of control in the United States.
But again, you're focusing on numbers. Now, what about knife murders? What about poisoning? What about running people over with cars? What about bludgeoning someone with a baseball bat? Murderers will find a weapon. So these numbers are odd to me. When people start putting forth numbers about, well, there's less guns, so there's less gun violence. It doesn't mean there's less violence. You think taking a gun away from a society is going to extract violence from humanity? It doesn't work that way. Guns did not introduce violence to the human being. Human beings have been a violent species since our inception. Guns are just another weapon, another thing for somebody to do their dirty deed.
Okay.
I mean, in all reality, if you're going to extract guns, then we got to go for knives and hatchets.
Chainsaws. See, that's the brainwashing that people believe is going to happen. I'm not saying take away your guns. Okay, I'm not saying that whatsoever. I just cannot understand the idea of having an assault rifle in your home or in your possession, because it is not necessary for everyday life. Or you get down in Texas where you carry an AR-15 because it's open carry out there. But now in reality, very, very, very few cases of shootings actually happen with fully automatic weapons. They don't really happen. Like, that's a very rare thing. Most gun statistics anywhere in the world, but even here in the United States, they're pistols, and most of them are with a .22 caliber bullet, single shot, 22 caliber bullet. And so, you could argue, well, why do you need that? Yeah, but who cares why I need it? It's not anybody's business to say why I own what I own. But I think this is one of the principles that's fundamentally American that other countries just can't really relate to. It's that a lot of people do not want the government or anyone else telling us what we can and cannot own. That's an infringement upon our freedom. Not only that, but one of our rights. And so when you start arguing, yeah, you can have a gun, but you can only have this many bullets, and it can only shoot this far, and it can only, fire at 3 p.m. And, it sounds ridiculous to someone like me, because I grew up around guns my whole life. I don't know one single person in my family, in my friendship circle, in my acquaintance circle, who ever shot anyone else, ever contemplated it, did it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but most people who are gun owners are not criminals. Most gun owners are actually very responsible people and very responsible about a piece of inanimate hardware that they own. We need to stop demonizing guns, because people need to be in charge of their actions. There's something wrong with society as far as someone like me is concerned. I believe that something is wrong with society, not guns. I think it's shifting the blame and shifting responsibility to blame a weapon for anything. I mean, if I owned a tank, doesn't make me any more inclined to go fire off a tank and kill people, or a machine gun, or a rocket launcher, or anything else. I'm not saying I want to own it, but who's to say I can't? Okay. I don't feel safe in a world. There's a lot of people, Dave, and I think a lot of people have a lot of trouble relating to this. But a lot of us, especially patriot-minded people, it's a principle-based thing. We don't believe that it's right for only police and only military to be the only ones that presumably should own weapons. History has proven that that's not a good recipe for a republic to survive. And so, we live in modern times and we don't feel like that's a threat. We don't feel like that's a reality.
But the world just 70 years ago was a much different place. There were people like Hitler walking around here. You know, the world was a much.
I will give you that. I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard the Hitler. I've heard the Stalin arguments. Okay,
yeah.
That's a different type with fascism and communism, where the government has full control. In Western civilized countries,
right?
Okay, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, and numerous others that have brought in a form of gun control, not to take your guns, but to control the safety of the gun, in your household, in your place of business. Okay,
Right.
It has proven that the numbers of murders or multiple shootings have decreased comparatively to what is happening in the United States.
Well, sure. I mean, if you take cars away from people, there's going to be less auto accidents. I mean, that's fundamental. But my point is, I can't lose sight of the principle of this. And, you know, you kind of just glossed over the whole, well, we're westernized. Listen, Dave, 70 years is not a long time. Now, for somebody who, you know, we tend to live within the framework of our own lifespan. And we so easily forget history. And we human beings have very short attention spans. And we seem to think that, yeah, but the world is different than it. You know, it'll never be that way again. We've learned. We've evolved. We don't live in that kind of world anymore. 70 years is not a long time between us and somebody like Stalin or Hitler. That's a blink of an eye over the course of history. That's just to think that we could never, especially for somebody that believes in conspiracies or the possibility therein, you know, and a lot of people do. They believe that there are forces at work that mean to subjugate us again, Western society. We believe, and I count myself among them, I believe that there are forces out there that if they had their way, we would not have this nice Western civilized society that you spoke of and that we enjoy right now. They would seek to undo that. And a lot of these conspiracies that I explore and a lot of evidence that seems to be on the table suggests that there are people that want to take that away from us. So, I see the reasonable argument of people ideologically wanting to move towards a more civilized society where we don't need guns and where that would be nice. But in reality, I don't think we've evolved to that point. I think we've had a long period of time, especially for those of us like yourself and me who live in the Western world, where we've had it a little bit easier than some of these other third world countries. They're constantly engulfed in war and strife and civil war and all these different things. They're living a different reality than we are. They're living a reality that most of the world was suffering from, 100 years ago. But we take for granted some of the peace that we have and some of the quote unquote freedoms that we enjoy these days. And we seem to kind of lose sight of the fact that we could easily lose that. It wouldn't take a lot for that to change. And so people like myself, I like to kind of think these things through and think, what if things all of a sudden changed and there were forces, powerful forces, government institutions or hidden government institutions that wanted to change this nice life we live and subjugate everybody again. Again, it wasn't that long ago in history when that was actually what was happening. So
a lot of people, Jamie, would say since 9/11, the United States has become extremely paranoid about everything. Look at what's happened on the borders. We've talked about the border
before that.
Well, I realize that, but before 9/11, the only thing you were paranoid about was somebody's husband finding out.
No, no, actually, Dave, I've been looking into a lot of this conspiratorial type narrative for almost 30 years. So this is not 9/11 actually sort of, made sense from that perspective for me when it happened. It didn't begin at 9/11 for me at all. And I don't think anybody's paranoid. I think, 9/11, 2001 happened at a time where it just so happened that a large percentage of the population was just getting into computers. They were starting to, get email, and social media was starting to blossom. And so, it just seems to me organic what's going on, all of the conspiratorial stuff. It's like I said earlier, it's a way for people to communicate. I'm not going to discount that there is a lot of fear-mongering, there's a lot of paranoia, but I'm extremely serious about my, and one of the big focuses of Rebel Planet News is keeping an eye on governments. That is one of our primary objectives, because we know that all of the major news outlets are controlled by corporations, at the very least. And some of those corporations have other agendas. So alternative media is very important to us. It's something that it's a way for people to talk amongst themselves instead of having the narrative always controlled by a very narrow scope of people. We can talk amongst ourselves. And so I think that this paranoia that you speak of, it does exist in some people, but I think I wouldn't even call it paranoia. In my estimation, it's people exploring alternative narratives. We're trying to figure out, are we being told the truth? And a lot of those investigations and a lot of that instinct to do so has actually borne fruit. We've actually shown many times that mainstream media was lying to us, hiding facts from us, withholding information, protecting politicians, protecting corporations, involved in a lot of sinister stuff. So, I don't think I would rather have a paranoid society that's looking for something that may exist, as opposed to a blind following society that just follows the king around. I would rather live in the paranoid world, if I had to choose one or the other. Ideally, a nice balance somewhere in the middle where we don't have to worry about things so much would be great. But I'm not going to pretend that I live in that world when I really don't. And I'm not going to, there are people in the United States that we don't like to take for granted that we have a nice life and that we have these opportunities and these freedoms. We appreciate them, but I think that people that are getting too comfortable with that and slipping off their shoes and say, well, all of the strife of humanity is behind us, I think you're ignorant if you do that. I think that's very, very careless. I think we constantly need to keep a hawk eye on governments, what they're doing, politicians, corporations, movers and shakers behind the shadows, and always protect our freedoms. Always protect our freedoms. Because anytime you start to give away your freedoms, that's a very, very slippery slope. And if things are possibly engineered to take your freedoms away, that's one of the things that's one of the things that really bothers me, Dave, is that people will sit around all day and all night and entertain conspiracy theories, about 9/11 or this thing or that thing. But when that's fine, but they don't ever conclude what the motivation for that was. And it seems clear to me that we don't necessarily know. People argued about 9/11. Well, maybe it's about taking over this part of the world. Maybe it's about oil. Maybe it's about this, that, or the other thing. I don't know. But I know that one result that I can prove that happened as a result of 9/11 is that our freedoms were taken away. A lot of them were written away in the Patriot Act. So
I'm not denying that, but the Patriot Act is so much different than gun control, and I can understand where America and American citizens are intermixing the two. I do get that.
Oh, okay. I don't think we're conflating. I think I think it's an equivalency. I don't think we're conflating the two into the same thing. It's two different things. but it all falls under the heading of freedoms. We, unlike you, do have in our Constitution the Second Amendment. So I think this is unique American, and I think it's for us to speak upon. This is for Americans to speak upon. And overwhelmingly, Americans have always supported the Second Amendment. The majority of Americans. And that's why it's lasted. That's why it sticks. And that's why institutions like the NRA are so powerful, because the majority is speaking. And therefore, it's principle-based, Dave. And I respect other people's input and opinions, and I listen to it. But, for me, it comes down to principles. It comes down to freedoms. And that's something that we in the United States cherish, and we should cherish. And
I get that, but explain to me, if the NRA is so powerful, why are they some of the highest paying lobbyists in Washington, D.C., when they don't have to be if they're so powerful?
Well, they are powerful, and maybe that's one of the mechanisms by which they are powerful. But they're also powerful in their message. Even in debates, they always come out on top, besides all the politics and the wheel greasing you're talking about and the lobbying and all that stuff, which they do, of course. But even in debates, a lot of intellectual gun debates have happened over the years. And, the gun advocates versus the gun control advocates, the people who protect the Second Amendment always come out on top. And it's not a lobbying issue at that point. It's a debate issue. And they always come out on top. Because at the end of the day, Dave, it's basically a principle versus a principle. And guns, like other things, property, a lot of different things. It's not just guns. A lot of the things in the United States fall under the heading of freedoms that this country was founded on. Now, we have a very checkered past, and the United States is far, far from perfect. But that principle of freedom is extremely important to patriots, is extremely important to most Americans. And when we start eroding that, we start to get relaxed about giving those up. That's a scary notion for a lot of people, me included. I don't feel comfortable with it. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Jamie, it's been a fun conversation. We could probably go another 3 nights in a row on that conversation. And you know what? It doesn't change my opinion of you or anybody who owns guns. And I will say this, I do like guns. I don't own any. Okay. But I have friends who do. If they invite me out shooting, hell yeah, I'm going to go. I enjoy firing a gun. I do plan on getting, registered as a gun owner in Canada. I have no problem admitting that. But it's one of those topics that's going to be a heated debate until something is figured out. But the one thing I'm sure we can agree with, Jamie, as we start to wind things up, whether it's Las Vegas, whether it's Aurora, whether it's Columbine, or wherever it is, thoughts and prayers just aren't enough anymore. They're not working.
No, I agree with that. I think one of the things we need to consider is the mental health institution. And I think that people need to be, we've talked about this before, but I think that people need to be more active in their communities.
Absolutely.
Not about controlling what other people do with their lives, but just engage. I think we walk amongst each other like we're all strangers. And that disconnect is very bad. People
Absolutely.
say, crazy people this. Well, how do we even know who the crazy people are anymore? Because we don't talk to them,
My friend, I got to wrap this up, but I'm going to end it on one comment from Joe Monk. He says, Dave, if you had a bunch of gnomes surrounding your house, I'll bet you wish you had an AR-15 with a high-capacity magazine. No, my friend, that's why I have a chainsaw and a maul, because I'm going to make sure it's over with and get as many of them red-hatted little bastards as I can.
No mo.
Exactly. Jamie Sexton, Rebel Planet News, thank you so much. We will talk to you again on Thursday, November 16th. You hold on, Jamie. I'm going to wrap this thing up. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, rocking Little Brother is Watching in the background. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. He brings us in and takes us home every single night on this program. Tomorrow night, we're going to get into some haunting tales from the crypto guru, Ronald Murphy, as the guru makes his return, much anticipated, on Spaced Out Radio. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to thank my team for helping me put this show together on our website, in behind the scenes, as we're going to hopefully have some news coming up here as we look to expand this show into the night. But most of all, I say thank you to everybody on Twitter, everybody in the chat rooms, for taking part in tonight's show. You make it fun, you make it interesting. The debate, the conversation is just fantastic. Keep up the great work, because together, my friends, we own the night. I will talk to you in exactly 21 hours from now. So thank you very much for being with me. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one. See ya.